Since its inception in 2005, Reddit has become one of the most popular online platforms, bringing people together in communities based on their interests, subreddits. Here, you can find everything from discussions about adorable animals and wholesome memes to debates on hobbies, science, and life stories. But among this vast variety, there's also a lesser-known side, content that surprises, shocks, or sparks controversy. So let's dive into the most fascinating corners of Reddit and explore the stories and phenomena that have left a mark on internet culture. What's the creepiest true story that happened to you or someone you know? This happened to my father. I will tell the story the way he told me to better the story. I was 22 years old. I had just gotten a place closer to my new job, but the neighborhood I lived in was secluded. Maybe 4 houses within a mile, nothing for miles after that. I was having a normal night, maybe my first week there. I watched some TV and fell asleep. When I woke up around 1 a.m., I was about to go to my bedroom when I remembered to turn off the bathroom light at the opposite end of the house. As I was walking through the living room, I could barely see through to the kitchen and even farther, the dining room. It was pitch black because the bathroom door was closed. In the dining room, however, I saw something tall standing up in the corner. I froze, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw it was an old man or woman in a white gown with white hair. "Hey," I yelled. The old person sprinted towards me like a fucking jet. I sprinted back to my room where the light was on. I put my hands up, ready to fight, and the old person came lunging in, and when they saw me, they stopped and said, "Why are you in my house?" I pretended I was leaving and apologized while I eased into the closer bathroom, locked the door, and called 911 with the house phone. Turns out a woman about a half-mile away in the neighborhood had a form of dementia and wandered into my house while I was sleeping. When I was about 8 years old, my neighbor filmed me in secret. I was trying to be a good kid and was helping with the laundry. Our dryer was broken, so we were using a clothesline outside. I was busy hanging up the wet laundry when the neighbor boy yelled to me. "Hey, I would go inside if I were you." "What?" I was confused. "You should go inside. My dad is recording you." I was super confused because when he said recording you, I thought he meant with a tape recorder, and I wasn't saying anything. Before I could respond, his dad started yelling at him. "Get inside, you little fucker, before I beat the shit out of you." That's when I saw him with his camcorder behind some trees. I didn't know what to do. One of our new kittens ran over to me and started biting my ankles trying to play. So I used that as an excuse to pick it up and go inside. Edit. A lot of people are saying what a bro that kid was, and I agree that really was pretty brave of him. I wonder why he spoke up. If he was being recorded or beat at home, wouldn't he have been too afraid of the ramifications to warn me? Somebody mailed my friend a bunch of pictures of his wife just going about her day. Some of them were taken through windows of their home. Police were called and everything, but nothing ever came of it. They actually moved because of it. Me? Imagine, your friend hired an agent to find out if his wife is cheating. The agent did not find anything, but gave him an envelope with his pics as proof of work. Wife finds this envelope and asks what this is. I don't know it was in the mail like that. He is living a lie ever since. Context. My mom's college boyfriend became her stalker after she left his awful, abusive-ass back in the mid-'80s. Several years ago, just before the last Harry Potter movie came out, my mom and I were marathoning the other 7 movies, and at about 1 a.m. the phone rings. Normally we don't answer. We figure if it's important they'll leave a message, but a call that late at night is probably urgent. Mom answers, and almost immediately her face changes and she tells me, "LVHQ, go wake up your father." Shit. I've never seen my mom this scared. I run upstairs and get him. Back downstairs, she's still on the phone, and I have no idea what's going on. Dad has some words with the caller, and we hug it out in the kitchen. This is when I found out my mom had a stalker, despite him being silent for years, and their whole breakup happening halfway across the country. He somehow found us. Said he'd driven by our house, complimented the neighborhood. Freaks me out to this day, wondering how much he knows about us, and if I've ever talked to him unwittingly. While I was in my very early 20s, my mom and I shared a house. We had a stalker. The first night we stayed in the house, someone got into our car. My mom happened to come outside, saw him, set off the panic alarm on the car, and scared him away. My backpack had been in the car, and he dumped the contents into the floorboard of the car, but left the paycheck that I had just cashed, all the cash still in a bank envelope. The police said it seemed that they were searching for something specific and really questioned me about what that might be. But I have no idea. Police were able to get a partial palm print off the car, but had no matches in their system. My mom and I were out doing yard work and found a phone cord under our deck. It connected into the phone box on the outside of the house. We called the phone company out, and they said that they figured that someone had been using the cord to hook up a phone and lay under our deck and listen in on our phone calls. They removed the cord and put a lock on the phone box. We also frequently heard someone walking outside our windows at night. We would call the police, and they would drive by, but not see anyone. Another time, all of the light bulbs from our exterior lights were removed. Once we came home, and my mom realized that a pair of earrings and a stuffed animal that had been sitting on her dresser were missing. There was no sign of anyone having broken in, but those items never turned up, and we were sure someone had been in the house. We frequently heard this weird thump and squeak noise that we could never figure out what caused it. Another time, my mom was raking leaves at the front of the house and saw something in one of our bushes. It was a voice-activated recorder wrapped in black plastic and tied to the trunk of one of our bushes. The recorder was tapped into our phone line. Someone had gotten under our house, drilled a hole through our foundation, and run a phone cord through the hole into the recorder in the bush. We have no idea how a neighbor, though they were all elderly, didn't see or hear this happening. The police, who were well aware of the issues by this point, now seemed to realize that this was a serious, scary problem. They sent several officers out to investigate the recorder. We were in the house talking to an officer and heard the thump/squeak noise that we always heard. We told the officer, that's the noise we can't identify. As it turns out, at that moment an officer was crawling under the house and had bumped a pipe. He was able to repeat the noise. The police figured that it was almost impossible to get into or out of the crawl space under our house without bumping that pipe. And we heard that noise a lot. The police think that whoever it was getting into the crawl space and lying under the house listening to us. We put a cover over the entrance and glued it down. We put sequins in a certain order in the glue so that we could tell if it had been removed and re-glued. It was all insanely creepy. We eventually moved. I moved in with my boyfriend, now husband, on a second-floor apartment. I felt so much safer with people all around and figured that the stalking issue was behind me. Not long after we moved and I noticed that our caller ID wasn't working. I called the phone company and they informed me that a Mr. Kramer had called and requested that the caller ID service be turned off on our phone. I had a meltdown. I was so upset. First off, because the phone company let some random person make changes on our phone line, and secondly, because apparently the issues were not behind me, and they were planning something and didn't want the caller ID to show up. I put a password on our account so no changes could be made without it. And that was the last issue we ever had. I really think the caller ID issue was possibly unrelated. Maybe someone was accidentally making changes to the wrong account or something. Either way, it was very creepy, though I have to admit, If the person had wanted to do something bad to either one of us, there were surely plenty of times that could have been done. It really seems they just wanted to observe us and scare us. I was only 4 when this happened. Was playing outside with my siblings and neighbors, and while they're busy playing, a lady approached me and took me to her place, a nearby neighborhood. After a while, everybody was freaking out and they started looking for me everywhere. This lady was severely depressed. Her husband left her after their son died. He couldn't handle her depression apparently. She took me to her place, fed me, and gave me tons of candy. For a couple days, she also made me wear her deceased son pajamas. At some point, she took me to buy some candy from the store. The store owner knew her, so he reported that to the police. She didn't hurt me at all. The doctor even said I was well fed. I always think of her and pray she's in a better place now. Even tried to go visit her when I was a college student. Her house was sold and she moved away apparently. Wow, that is crazy. So you were legit kidnapped. That's probably the absolute luckiest kidnapping scenario ever. Story happened to my mom years ago when she was in her late teens. Her and a couple friends were driving up one of the canyon roads one night when an unmarked police car flagged her down from behind with his lights. So she pulled over to the side of the road. Officer came up to the window, told my mom to step out of the car, and then noticed her friends. I assume he thought she was alone. When she went to open the door, he stopped her, nervously changed his tone, and asked my mom where they were going. My mom gave a throwaway answer and has now started to get creeped out by this guy. After looking at the girls in the car for a second, he spots beer. All were underage. But instead of ticketing them, he tells my mom to give him the case of beer, then told her there are creepy people and devil worshippers who live in the canyon and to head back to the city. So my mom and her friends gave this guy the beer and went back into the city. A few weeks later, she's watching the news and there's a story about a man who's posing as a cop pulling over unsuspecting women and raping them. They then gave a description of the car, and it was the same car that had pulled her and her friends over that one weekend. She did find it odd this guy didn't show his badge, nor was he in uniform, but I don't think it hit her until that story how dangerous it could have been. She believes the guy didn't initially see her friends when he pulled her over and just assumed she was driving alone. I was stalked by a 40-plus-year-old man from the ages of 10 till 14. My parents told me about it when I was 13. I was unaware, but they were. He had been following me to school. He had been mailing me things, taking pictures of me, and sending my parents threatening messages in all sorts of ways. I was stalked by a 40-plus-year-old man from the ages of 10 till 14. My parents told me about it when I was 13. I was unaware, but they were. He had been following me to school. He had been mailing me things, taking pictures of me, and sending my parents threatening messages in all sorts of ways. I was at a party at my friend Brian's house. I was really uncomfortable because I didn't really know anyone there, and I knew that Brian's friends were really into drugs. I wound up just watching movies and drinking mixed drinks until I fell asleep in a chair. The next morning, I was getting a glass of water and getting ready to leave when one of Brian's friends approached me. He asked me if Brian and I hooked up because he had heard so much noise coming from his bedroom. I said no, and he continued to tease me about it. He was being creepy and insulting, so I just left. Later that morning, I found out that Brian had overdosed and died during the night. His friend had heard Brian moaning and thrashing around and thought that he was having sex. I've posted this before. Staying in a motel with my wife one night. She falls asleep really quickly, but for me, it takes a while to drift off to sleep. So I'm lying there in the dark for a while, and I distinctly hear a voice coming from somewhere in the room quietly, though just above a whisper, say, "I think they're asleep now." Immediate fright response. I bolt out of bed, turn on all the lights, and start frantically searching the room. I look in the bathroom behind the shower curtain, under the bed. Nothing. It's a one-room motel room. The door is bolted shut. There's nobody else in the room. My wife is now freaked because of my actions. What I experienced is called a hypnagogic hallucination, not an uncommon experience during the initial stages of sleep. But if I had not known what that was, I would have thought the room was haunted. This happened about 3 years ago or so. I was sitting in the kitchen, and it was around 10 p.m. or so. I heard a really loud thump in the basement. I live alone with 2 dogs, so any sound is somewhat frightening to me. So as I'm walking down the stairs to the basement, I hear the thumping again in an oddly rhythmic pattern. I creak open the door into the basement bedroom, and I see my dog is just ramming his head and body into the wall over and over. I can't explain to you how shockingly unnatural looking it was. It looked like he was controlled or something. I called him over, and he stopped and came upstairs with me. The hours later, I hear the thumping again. I get out of bed again. However, when I went down to check it, it was my other dog that was ramming his head into the wall. It was like he was possessed. Scared the cheese out of me. Since then, nothing like that has happened. But what an unexplainable event. So about 3 years ago during summer, I had a habit of staying up late playing games with my window open. This usually wasn't a problem as my neighborhood was usually quiet. However, one night, someone knocked on my window around midnight. When I went over to investigate, I heard someone calling out for help in Spanish. My family was up, and I assumed it was one of my neighbors, so I went outside. Once I saw the person, I immediately knew something was off cause. 1, this wasn't one of my neighbors, and 2, this person's clothing was ripped, and they didn't have shoes on. Turns out the person was a she. I thought it was a young boy at first, and she only spoke Spanish. I tried communicating with my basic Spanish skills to no avail. Eventually, I went inside to ask my parents for help. We ended up calling my uncle, who was fluent in Spanish. He helped translate and told us that she said she was being human trafficked from Honduras and needed help. She wanted either $500 or a car to LA. We couldn't give either and offered to call the police, but she seemed adamant that the police didn't get involved. After this bombshell, my family went inside and decided to just call the police. After making this decision, we wanted to check up on her at least, but as my mom and I were walking outside, we saw a car with no headlights pull onto our street. We immediately noped back inside. Once we felt that the coast was clear, we went back out, and the lady was gone. We called the cops and filed a report, but we never heard anything more.